Hello ladies, gentlemen, and others. My name is Dan, the voice behind that Kaito Dan, and welcome to my review for RWBY Volume 9, Episode 8, T Amidst Terrible Trouble. But before we begin, please watch the episode first before this to support the show and the amazing people behind it, plus dodge some rather major spoilers. Quick love as well to some notable comments from my last review, largely focused on the explosive tirade with RWBY and Jean, with Charlie Tango thankfully stressing a key point that neither side were wrong to feel the way they do, just how they expressed it, while DK Toy Chest stressed the core source of Jean's long-standing pain that hopefully can be fixed so the two can come together once more. And then finally, the Disney lover called for the return of some chibi goodness to help battle the dark clouds overhead right now, which I agree with, but hey, at least we have to look forward to this as well in the meantime. But yeah, last week certainly was a heated affair, that's for sure. What started out depressingly quirky soon led to a monster blowout amongst the heroes, especially from RWBY, who's finally reaching her breaking point, setting up what was surely going to be another emotional experience in this episode. And boy did it ever. But was the woes worth it for the reward? Or did the tea spill leave nothing but a mess? Let's talk about it. Oh look, another episode warning, how cute. Though I do agree with the sentiment that many had after this episode that it could have been better worded due to the really dark content explored. So for that, I will say for anyone watching this who, even if you have seen the episode, which you should, do so with high caution, as I will have to discuss topics related to death, abuse, and cruelty to certain creatures. Also, I want to comment on Crunchyroll really dropping the ball this episode, because 2 times they put up thumbnails for the episode with major spoilers in them, which sadly I was affected by. It sucks that we fans have been really on the ball trying to promote spoiler safety in the community, only to have 4 notable character returns spoiled before we can even see the damn episode. And yes, this was confirmed to be a fail on Crunchyroll's part, as they didn't use the images provided by the Rooster Teeth lot, and apparently even a deeper content warning as well, so that doubly sucks on both fronts there. And it's another issue with Crunchyroll on top of their subtitle headaches that I pray gets fixed and does not repeat for the remaining episodes. Anyway, with the episode itself, we start by catching up with RWBY, who finally stops running away from the others to find a moment to just curl up with her sadness. But she's not alone, of course. Little is still on hand to try and lift her mood and put her back on the right path, not wanting her to stray from those she needs right now. But that goes about as well as you can expect with a still very emotionally high-strung RWBY. She's never been this hostile with how she feels towards herself, and the thought of returning to those that she's fearful of hurting the more she's around them just keeps sparking her self-torment even stronger. So it's not that surprising then she turns her vitriol towards Little despite their good intentions. RWBY is so lacking in self-confidence as a protective friend right now, she even reckons Little will die like many others before them the longer they stay around her. The poor girl sees herself as a walking death magnet, which is very heartbreaking to see in someone who for so long has always tried to reach out for others, especially those in need, rather than push away. It works though, and soon RWBY is now truly alone, even being left behind by the ever mysterious blue butterfly that I still assume is part of Alex that got casted aside upon her fate at the tree, having since kept close links to RWBY since her arrival, perhaps watching on as the new girl walks down the same doomed path that she did, and now they part from RWBY, sensing perhaps she strayed too far. At least that's the vibe I get. I do feel we will get true answers on this butterfly very soon. Cut then to this cool sequence of RWBY surrounded by darkness, symbolizing how truly alone she feels, only to then be lit up via spotlight as her angered strop slows to an inquisitive slow stride. Now her temper is replaced with confusion once she eventually arrives in the neighboring Dark Acre, where she finds a brightly lit up mansion amidst the ruins. RWBY has been unknowingly lured to here so she can reunite with some familiar faces, the host of this party being quite obvious just by the exterior alone, but it's made all the clearer to RWBY upon seeing the pictures inside. Welcome to Neo's dream mansion, where she's been housed up since arriving in the Ever After, though it's more than just a home base. It's her stage for some twisted mind games all squared on RWBY. Why else then would she make such an extravagant looking place lit up like a Vegas clubhouse if not to have it basically scream to RWBY, "You want me? Come and get me, I'm right here." Of course, she likes to tease her foes with a bit of suspense and mental warfare before she starts any killing, and she does so by showing RWBY images tied to some very personal memories and feelings of Neo, such as the night she lost her partner thanks to RWBY, the deal with the devil with Cinder that Neo made because of their shared hatred for RWBY, and of course, this family portrait back when Neo was still trivia vanille, a depressed and secluded young girl raised by Jimmy and Caramel, which naturally, if you've read Roman Holiday like I have, you'll know all about this side of Neo's past, meaning you probably would have popped off as happy as I was to see this featured now in the main show. And thankfully, I do still believe it is easy to understand the intent of such images being shown here, even if you don't know the full context. It's Neo basically showing RWBY the life that she escaped that was made better with a certain old friend support before RWBY came in and robbed her of that. But I do still recommend reading Roman Holiday, as it is a very entertaining book that will only go on to further enrich these scenes, so you can fully understand what Neo left behind in her old life when she became the Neo that we know of now, and why she's fighting so hard to make RWBY pay for taking it away from her. And lest we forget, there's also the biggest link between the two girls, Neo's old partner, Roman Torchwick, who we see in this big picture alongside her before he starts to move and speak. This appearance sadly was the thumbnail spoiler that I got, thanks again Crunchyroll, but I was expecting to see Roman at some point in this volume thanks to Neo's power, the intro tease, and Ever After's weird nature, so thankfully it wasn't a totally blind surprise that was ruined for me. But what I didn't expect was his voice, or I guess voices would be more accurate. With the need for a new voice actor since his last major appearance, Chris Wehrkamp, the voice actor for Clover, returns to the role after voicing Roman in the Ice Queendom dub. However, he's not the only one playing the cunning villain. We also have the original new voice actor for Roman, Billy Kometz, who you may know as Dr. Maruki from Persona 5 Royal, Ferdinand von Ayer in Fire Emblem Three Houses and Three Hopes, and Josuke from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. So yeah, we got two Romans for the price of one, and this is due to the unfortunate situation that sadly Billy passed away last year, thus Chris taking over in his stead for Ice Queendom and likely needing to appear here alongside Billy for any lines that Billy was obviously not able to do anymore. And while this does lead to some bumpy moments where the two distinct voices clash a little bit, I'm still very glad that they didn't just have Chris fully redo Roman's lines, as I was sad that we never got to hear Billy's take on the character until now. The man had a masterful ability to nail charismatic, charming roles, both good and bad, and as proven in this episode, he showcases that in top form, with RWBY's resident smooth criminal, sounding perfectly sly and devious, while also doing an amazing job capturing Roman's anger and menace. And props as well for the RWBY for the inclusion of a sweet tribute message at the end of the episode. Not just for the respect, but also putting it after the credits, as anywhere else in the episode would have either spoiled the return, more than the thumbnail did, or clashed poorly with the dark note that the episode closed out on. And indeed, this is Roman back at his morally twisted yet alluring to watch best, right down to the way that he taunts with his cane, dances across the scene, and keeps RWBY on her toes to further leave her bruised heart vulnerable enough for the mind games to do their stuff. And he's not the only returning guest, as he reveals a full mad tea party with Ironwood, Ozpin, Clover, Lionheart, Pyrrha, and Penny. Various people who have died that, in one way or another, RWBY played a part in their demise, further wounding RWBY's spirit with their appearance. Few notes from this. Firstly, we finally got Maya Engine Pyrrha, and she looks really good. Secondly, I adore how they often move and act as one unit, matching whatever intent or emotions that Roman and Neo share, uniting the group as one creepy hive mind, right down to simple changes in expressions for that extra creepiness factor. And thirdly, I love the way those who greet RWBY have slight tweaks to their tone of voice and expressions, especially Taylor as Penny and Jen as Pyrrha, to really sell this isn't the real deals, and we're meant to feel just how wrong it is to see them all be used as pawns in Neo's mean-spirited plan for mental torment. I will say though, while Leo and Clover's inclusions have confused others, I do get why they are there, even loosely so. Neo is trying to use their deaths as more examples of fates that RWBY had a part in creating, even in very loose ways, despite being the good guy. And you could also look at them as two examples of leaders who also failed miserably, just like she has. Like, this is Neo saying, "You're not the only one who has failed at leading the way as a hero protecting others, and look where it got these two. You're only gonna meet the same fate the longer you keep denying what I'm trying to say." That's the reasoning I have, at least, for their inclusion, though I will also admit it is a small dent to the scene that the pair aren't more involved. Sure, they are the least connected to RWBY of the bunch, but as I just touched on, there are aspects tying them to her that could have been touched on more clearly, just like the rest. Without this personal touch explored as well as it should have been, they could honestly be cut from the scene and nothing would be lost, which is a shame. And maybe it was a runtime thing, I don't know, but something more is still better than the pair having major "he thinks they're on the team" energy as is, making this the only real noticeable smudge on this otherwise striking set piece. Either way, this is further proof that Neo's semblance is on some next level stuff if she's able to make this warped version of a "this is your life" showcase, all while having Roman strut his stuff as her mouthpiece that still very much acts like the real deal. He even talks about the freedom to do what she wanted since arriving in Ever After is the same that she was offered by Roman back when they first became partners, as well as recalling his fate, which he too blames RWBY for. But RWBY refuses to apologize or take the heat, and I doubt Neo would have accepted an apology anyway, but it's gotta hurt all the same to hear RWBY brush aside any responsibility like it meant nothing to her, while it meant everything to Neo. It's no wonder then that she's going so far to try and make RWBY suffer rather than just simply die. But it's also ironic that it's putting an emphasis on how similar the two are in being led astray by their flawed, emotionally driven mentalities. RWBY continues to go through this entire scene struggling to understand she has to stop shouldering the blame for the fates of those who made choices of their own wills, while Neo, as Roman just mentioned, always wanted to run away from whatever weighs her down. But since Roman's death, she's never allowed herself the chance to act and care about anything else bar this loss, which rests heavy on her heart, blinding her from finding any means of positive escapism and recovery, just like RWBY. Only unlike her enemy who hides away her misery inside herself, Neo is letting her pains drive her every action, the more she keeps looking to feel the pain with vengeance, making this whole scenario have this rather fascinating undercurrent linking the two girls that much deeper, both sharing a similar problem with blinding emotions, allowing this whole set piece to feel much more layered than just a simple clash between a wounded hero and a devious, revenge-seeking villain, that may lead to some interesting developments down the line, but for now, it's that extra special spice to the altercation that allows this to feel like a major moment for both girls, not just RWBY. Also, side note, the way RWBY moves her arm in this shot is a little off to me. It feels a bit too wobbly for what's supposed to be a bold, somewhat confident declaration to fight, which did take me out of the scene just a little bit. But regardless, Roman unveils Neo's true plan for what she wants to do to RWBY, and that is to make her willingly drink from a cup of ever after tea. Not just so she dies, but so she does so only after admitting to herself that she's a fool for having believed she could be a hero, not after all the mistakes, failures, and deaths that she's been central to. It's quite the twisted way for Neo to try and really punish RWBY, and again it shows how blinded by her emotions Neo has become that she's crafted such a morbid end for RWBY that goes far beyond just simply wanting your standard level of payback. It's not just a life for a life, it's a total dismantling of RWBY's life that she craves, not realizing herself that Neo is also living a life with a broken mindset in need of fixing, not further cracking. But if it's a fight RWBY wants first, it's a fight she gets, and Neo proves right away this won't be easy, with RWBY already struggling to hold her off alongside the rest of the party. And if you listen very closely, you just might be able to hear Klaxon's pleas to be either of these two in this pose. We do, however, briefly cut back to the others searching for RWBY, with Yang taking her sister's outburst very hard, more so feeling frustrated that she wasn't able to help RWBY before she broke down. I mean, she clearly tried to in the past, if not for all the cutoffs, but that does little to ease Yang's mood when she still couldn't tell that RWBY was hurting in the first place and what exactly was the cause of it. Props though for Weiss in understanding and expressing, albeit largely through hindsight, that RWBY felt she couldn't talk to them about what she was dealing with because of the very point made clear in her rant. She felt overwhelmed, largely with all the expectations to be that leader they all counted on every time they said that they would rely on her, trust her guidance, and believe that she could lead them. In her head, these became lofty high ideals that were out of reach for her and wound up creating too much pressure to ever put aside her leadership focus to focus instead on what is more important to her at the moment, like her own issues. Not realizing, of course, the others never wanted RWBY to shoulder such things alone, nor expected her to be perfect. But thinking back on past interactions, it's easy to see why she would assume otherwise. There's been a lot of instances where RWBY has heard someone talk to her about either the expectations she must have as a leader, or the deep levels of valuation that people have for her that must have made it tough going to live up to. Standout examples for this being the obvious leadership chat with Ozpin, Jean telling RWBY that she provides the courage for others to follow, Yang questioning RWBY's recent success as a leader after the events of Volume 7, and Blake's admission that she looks up to RWBY and her perseverance. Discussions like this and so much more have inadvertently hammered into RWBY's head for a long while now that she needs to be perfect, when so many people expect her to lead the way as the best version of herself. And sure, even though RWBY willingly chose to become the kind of huntress who inspired others to persevere in the face of adversity by becoming an example of this mindset, she did so by believing she had to hide within herself anything negatively affecting her ability to be that perfect leader that others could count on, not realizing until it became near impossible in her mind to change herself that she needs moments where she can let her focus go aside and she can focus on her own woes, made all the heavier as well to accept when everyone else is being fine with their own issues as well, and being supported when she is not. It's great to see the show find this time to focus on this post-outburst and finally let all the rest of the group find that dawning of just how bad RWBY has been as of late, and thankfully in a way that doesn't paint either side as totally at fault. Everyone involved does have some of the blame to share, nicely weaving the case of it being the best means of fixing this problem is having everyone sort it out together. The only way to make Ruby realize she doesn't have to shoulder the burdens of the leader and the inspiration, as well as the girls coming to terms with their part in their leader's woes, is by them all uniting as one, carrying the emotional loads side by side, which in turn will help project the truest, best inspiring message for others to follow, that we are stronger together, more so than we are on our own, be it against a deadly villainous force seeking to divide humanity, the monsters who feed off negativity, divisions amongst kingdoms, cultures and beyond, or simply finding ways to become our happiest, strongest selves. It then also allows this brief detour to be something of a main setup point for something that is going to be key in their future. The hero's newfound resolve upon returning home to bring Remnant united as one against Salem, ahead of a possible encounter with the God Brothers, having learned to forge a strong group bond that would truly carry each other through any burden side by side. Maybe we could have had more time getting to see the girls fully discuss what this massive shakeup to Ruby means to them and how they feel about her outbursts and comments like that, and also get more from Jean too, who is oddly kept out of the discussion despite being just as much a part of the whole dynamic as the girls are. But for what we got, and given the other moving pieces at play, I quite like what we did get, especially in showing that the girls aren't ignorant. They just need to make up for lost time now they are seeing the ramifications of unintentionally taking Ruby's long-standing bright spirit for granted. Explosions nearby then send us right back to the mansion, where the emotional damage is being matched by physical body blows to poor Ruby, who can barely hold her own against all the gunfire, whilst not letting stuff like Ironwood calling her out for assuming the best way to protect Atlas over him, or Pyrrha berating her sacrifice wound her heart even more. And the music, by the way, really top stuff here, with the string instruments adding to the gripping sense of desperation and chilling abuse. Though it also knows when to step back and let the dialogue take center stage, with Penny the first to really dig in that knife on some still very open wounds. She taunts Ruby for failing twice to save her despite being the one person who means the most to Penny, a cruel line so wonderfully performed by Taylor, whose sweet voice makes these barbed lines sting all the more for us and Ruby, doubly so cause it is Penny saying it right to her face, even in this false form. This expression on Ruby's face paints the perfect picture of a poor soul still grieving the loss, heartbroken for all the pain that she carries deep down, and is also crushed that she's being forced to confront it in this vicious wave of mental brutality when she's not ready for it. And the hurt continues too as Roman keeps the pressure before Pyrrha takes over, this time matching painful words with actual painful blows. A conflicting experience to see for me because of such cruel taunting. We're also seeing Pyrrha fight again for the first time since Volume 3, with the same grace and flow as she was known for in the past. No grace though when Ironwood takes over. A nasty gut punch rocks Ruby right out of trying to explain she only wanted to save everyone, and forces her to believe that she was doing more harm than good. Again, more harsh words that we have some understanding that Ruby does actually feel herself, making it all the more worse that Neil is able to perfectly attack these troubled thoughts in her psyche so well. Though I gotta say, seeing Ozpin follow up with this painful barrage of heavy cane strikes was the part that I was really starting to get shaken up by. Ruby is getting bruised and battered so hard that it's shaking the surrounding house features, and the audio effects with every hit is especially crunchy to make it sound all the more painful. Plus, there's Shannon adding to the growing list of returning VAs who are taking this rare chance to be malicious and just knocks it out of the park. And the fact that Ruby is getting pummeled right now by someone who was the first person to really look at her and see the potential of a heroic leader just makes it so depressing to see. Especially with all the comments about how many more lives does she have to ruin before she realizes that she can never be the heroic leader that Ozpin did try to call her. And ultimately, Ruby eventually has had enough, finally retaliating, only to see that she is cut down, Oscar, leaving another dear friend of hers lying on the floor dead. only this time, she was the one who did the deed. And for as unsettling as it is, props to the RWBY for not shying away and instead keeping the body, bloody scar and all, on screen, so RWBY can't escape what she did, fake or not. The RWBY really wants us to feel the sickeningly horrifying weight of this painful sight just as much as RWBY, so keeping the body on sight allows the visual to sink into our thoughts so we're right there with her, as she has to not just see the act that she caused, but the reactions of all the loved ones that Roman and Neo use to taunt her with, furthering the sense that RWBY is only going to hurt more people the more she remains in this world, and it's really starting to take effect on her just by her reaction where she's shaking and crumpling to the floor. Once more then, they offer up the tea, and at this point RWBY is seriously contemplating drinking. But then out of nowhere comes this vector blast of energy, sending Neo flying out of the mansion, and we see RWBY's savior is Curious, valiantly coming to her hour of need and comforting her, just to then sink its claws deep into RWBY. Sketchy Akachi has become a reality, as I'm sure a lot of us suspected and feared. The ruse is finally over, and Curious can now reveal his true colors. They've been a very bad cat, purposely trying to wear down RWBY's spirit so she can then be taken over by the cat thanks to their power of replacing a broken heart with their own. For it is cursed with curiosity that it must satisfy, and the cat's biggest curiosity is why it was left in this world by his makers as they went off to create Remnant. There's a lot to unpack here, so let's start by reveling in this suspected but still wonderfully executed heel turn by Curious. Stripping away the meta fun of suspecting them to be bad in the first place simply because they're voiced by Robbie Daymond, this shines a full light on much of Curious's past actions. They first interacted with RWBY once it learned she was human, and then repeatedly left so they could be tested by the world's trials, chipping away at RWBY's emotions, and only returning to rescue or guide RWBY, not for her sake, but just to protect Curious's target from either dying, ascending, or finding emotional growth that would replace her heart before Curious can. And it also explains why they were more transfixed on RWBY more than the rest of the group, as their hearts were too strong to consider taking over. And this also helps explain as well a little bit more about what may have happened with Alex, Curious likely having tried the same thing with her, but failing. It's a twisted scheme that's revealed remarkably well, especially considering the last time we saw Curious, there was an air of sadness in how they felt hurt by RWBY and the others for siding with Jean over them, and the comment of Alex betraying him. Adding that to this brief moment of Curious seemingly coming to RWBY's aid in the bleakest of her moments is perfectly lifting our hopes up, only to dash them on the rocks in such a violent backstab that I just cannot help but love, especially with Lindsay adding to the terror with that piercing scream. This latest blow to her spirit keeps the pressure also escalating more and more until that eventual breakdown moment. But then there's also the other factor revealed in this, that my suspicions were correct. The God Brothers were behind the creation of Ever After. They did create this place as another one of their failed experiments before deciding to ditch it for their next one, be it Remnant or something else, before coming along to that. And it's something that I've expected for a while now. After getting that reveal, it's just so rewarding. But also to hear that they were the ones responsible for Curious adding so much mystery to their life, and the whole cursed with curiosity and wanting to find out why they were left behind, it adds so much as well to both the source of the feline's dark motivations and the continued development that these two are in need of a good teardown of their own. They really do have the worst respect for their creations, treating them like toys that they can simply cast aside whenever they're done with and not worry about, despite always leading to nasty ripple effects. First we saw with Salem, and the destruction as well of humanity and the reshaping of the world to what Remnant is now, and now we have this world of an endless living for a single purpose lifestyle and then dying before being reborn with no valuing of a single life, and the shady cat whose lust for knowledge, discoveries and more can never be satisfied. especially since their biggest query can't be answered thanks to them vanishing. Everything keeps coming back to these two being central to so much grief, and it really has me looking forward to the day that we finally get to see them again, just so someone, most likely RWBY, can finally chew them out for acting like selfish, callous beings talking smack about humanity needing to respect them and lives when they have no respect being given back, much less their actions have made so much stuff harder than necessary for so many lives in the first place. Right now though, things aren't looking good for RWBY, so it is a good thing then that a literal bit of little help holds curious as Little, who has been watching on for a while now, finally steps in, creating an opening as well for Neo to get the drop on the cat, and then give him a taste of their own medicine. This gives Little a chance to try and help RWBY to flee, only for such attempts to meet a cruel, cruel end as Neo stomps on the poor mouse, ending its life. Another life lost because RWBY wasn't able to protect them, unable to stop what was going on around her, and understandably, this is what breaks what remains of RWBY's spirit. Her words of warning from earlier in the episode have rung true in the worst way possible. It's a crushing, pardon the very morbid pun, moment that left me reeling. I mean, sure, I suspected Little would die at some point, but I never expected it to be like this, and in a moment so violent, a savage act that pierces her heart, much less RWBY's, and yet I also can't help but love it, because it is the perfect way to finally tip RWBY over the edge. Another life robbed that she had a part in, another moment of weakness that she couldn't recover from in time to stop, proving everything that Roman and Neo was taunting her with to be true, so it wasn't all just talk. And considering I still believe Little is RWBY's fractured hope, reborn as this sweet, pure-hearted guiding soul, it's all the more symbolic that this is the last thing that was broken before RWBY finally loses all light left within her. No shocker then, just as the others finally arrive, RWBY decides to drink the tea and force her own ascension, resulting in the tree reaching out to her and sending her falling to its grasp. Now, we all know RWBY isn't going to stay dead from this. That pesky plot armor thing is quite strong indeed, but that doesn't override what it means to RWBY to see her finally give up on not just being the hero, but also living in general. She felt she could no longer deserve a chance to live for a moment of happiness again if she was better off vanishing so those that she cares about would be better off without her. And that submission is so tragic to see. But thankfully, there is that old saying, once you hit rock bottom, the only way to go is up. RWBY breaking herself apart like this, while wrong and rife with sadness, at least opens the door now for a trip into the afterlife where hopefully she gets to realize with a clearer head she does deserve to keep living, she does deserve happiness, and she shouldn't give up on herself. But how can she do that? Well, there's a few avenues. Firstly, we are bound to see a moment again where we're crossing paths with a mysterious blacksmith. They're likely the ones who are tasked with forging the new life for those who do ascend, and it's them who will have to try and convince RWBY that she does need to shed Ruby Rose as the identity away and take up a new life in an effort to find emotional peace. And could RWBY agree to this offer? Certainly, at this point at least, when she's at her lowest and absolutely craving for any kind of way out. And it would be interesting to see what this new form that the blacksmith would have in mind is. Little could ascend in her place, finally learning their purpose was to give RWBY the hope that she needs in her darkest hour. There's also the true versions of those who have died, like Penny and Pyrrha, who could also speak to RWBY and let her know that she shouldn't blame herself for the choices they made, and she needs to move on. And while we may also get some chances to cross paths with Alex, I think the one that I expect the most is a meeting with Summer. After all, she was RWBY's first inspiration, the person that she took so much of her identity from as both a huntress and as a person, so it would only feel right that she is the said source of identity to help her daughter find that course of action to correct herself as only a mother could do. being the one to help RWBY understand that she has done good and she deserves her own joy. She just needs to learn that she can only do so by standing alongside those she loves rather than going at it solo. Perhaps some are also maybe using her own fate as an example of this, having met her end at Salem's hands because she confronted her alone. Regardless of who does or doesn't show up, I just hope that that is the main direction for the scene, trying to present RWBY with clarity, reasons to keep living, and only touching her flaws just to help her grow from them, rather than painting it as she has to change herself wholesale just to be content. That being said, it is still a striking moment to see RWBY essentially die like this by her own hand, right in front of her own loved ones' faces, and everyone's reactions certainly are worth noting. Jean, as crushed as he is with the girls, is the only one who looks away, perhaps because of all the death that he's had to experience, whereas the rest of them are just looking in such absolute state of shock and dismay, especially Yang, who can barely stand if not for Blake, and she probably would have crumpled to the floor without her. And understandably so. That's her family gone from her. The life that she helped raise and protect, but also the life that she wasn't able to realize was so deep in turmoil before this outcome arose. Yang is probably right now feeling the most to blame for this, at least in her mind, and I don't want to hear any talk by the way of, oh, why didn't she or the others try to stop RWBY, because that kind of talk when it comes to how people respond to seeing someone end themselves is deeply disrespectful and also very uncalled for when such reactions are common in these circumstances. People have felt stunned stiff, unable to move before, during, and after the incident, and it's not as simple as saying, oh, why didn't they do anything, when they probably could have never predicted this course of action. And regardless, I am very, very excited to see how indeed Yang and the rest of the group truly respond to this loss, separated from everything else that they gotta deal with. But when it comes to interesting reactions, perhaps the most intriguing is Neo's. She finally got the payback that she wanted. Her plan succeeded in breaking RWBY's will before breaking her life. But instead of feeling joy, she has this look of dissatisfaction and confusion, for she feels nothing. No glee, no fulfillment, no relief in seeing RWBY die. Heck, when the voice of Roman is done reveling in her stead, he proclaims that they can now rule this land free from a meddlesome issue like RWBY, only for Neo to shake her head. She doesn't want that. She only wanted RWBY dead. And that's the problem. She lived for so long finding her happiness in one thing that as soon as it was taken from her, she kept clinging to that loss of Roman as her sole drive, rather than trying to live for something else, leaving her now with nothing once she finally got that revenge she put her all into. What else is there for her to live for? What else can she count on to keep pushing through one more lonely day when she hasn't done anything to help fill in that hole that Roman's death has left her with, but agony, bitterness, and grief? I long suspected that there was going to be a moment like this when Neo finally learns the flaws in her misguiding direction in life, and while I certainly didn't expect it to happen here with her actually succeeding in killing RWBY, I love that Neo was immediately left empty, striking it hard and true right away that Neo's mindset was wrong, and this could lead to so many different new directions for her, all of which could be very entertaining on some level, with the pool now wide open for her character to go different places and different avenues, at least for the moment, because, well, yeah, let's get to it, shall we? Right now, she is so emotionally broken by this outcome, it's left Neo in a near comatose-like state of shock. Unsurprising again, considering this massive crack in her mentality after living by just this one overwhelming desire. But also, there's the issue of the cat, who is furious that their best ticket out of the ever after is gone. At least until he sees the new piece on the board that they can play with. And Curious soon sends everyone else back with a big magic breath attack before really showing his true colors. Gone is the enchanting purple and blues of a mysterious yet welcoming small feline, and in its place is a larger, more terrifying beast with a grin as evil as its intentions. And a color scheme that echoes another devious trickster that also has ties to a role played by Robbie Daymond, something I think I called back in a Murder of Birds livestream a while back, so yay me, I guess. But seriously, this guy is freaky as balls, especially that smile. Major props to the design and animation team for this huge nightmare fuel, and it only gets worse from here, because now it lunges at the comatose Neo, reveling in its now empty shell that it can use, and it left it vulnerable for, well, this. Good grief, this is sickening to watch. It's one thing to see a smaller Curious claw into RWBY's chest and try and take over a body that way. It's another thing to see this giant cat force itself down Neo's throat, and the girl's wide, distorted eyes and twitching limbs really driving up the uncomfortable tone of this gross corruption. And for all the wrongs that Neo has done, she does not deserve this. Few people in this series do, but she especially does not deserve this whilst being a villain who has largely done so just so she can finally live a life of her own control. And now that control is being forcibly ripped away from her by the very identity that she kind of escaped to because of being a fan of this book. And this identity that she fought so hard to gain in her own life is again being stripped away and being left behind with nothing. Sadly, Jean tries and fails to stop the process, and to make this whole turn take an even more wrong turn to it, we finally hear Neo speak. And it's not her own voice. It's the cat, reveling in its new body, one with a twisted smile and incredible power, mixing the cat's magic with Neo's semblance, making them not just a major worry to see them whisk off towards the tree, they could be a major new threat if they reach Remnant, able to create God knows what with such power, not to mention the cat now having the desire to seek its creators and having the info to do so thanks to the girls. And this ends up becoming a perfect way to now really escalate the need to get back home. So yeah, quite the heavy note to end the episode on, huh? Our leading hero and a dear friend are now both gone, the rest are emotionally wounded by the loss, and now we got a wicked fusion of incredible creative powers and a destructive Curious heading to their homeworld, with the heroes left picking up the pieces. At least there's one small personal enjoyment for me in finally seeing the Neo is the Cheshire Cat theories that I saw way back when Neo first appeared, now coming full circle. I do hope though she is saved, not just because again she doesn't deserve this, but also because I feel her story should continue, with her finally learning to live her life for more than just revenge, to try and perhaps make new connections, and find a way to be content in life once more with her control of it on full, perhaps maybe even helping the heroes. Yes, it would be hard to accept her aid after she just held RWBY off herself and she killed Little, but it wouldn't be the first villain that they found allegiance with who has got a bit of a death count, and they have certainly merited having her around because of not just her skills, but also what she can benefit by being around people who have also had to deal with deep losses, blinding emotions, and a desire to take control of their lives in the face of anything that tries to cause turmoil to them, like Jean. They certainly have a lot in common there, and it might be thanks to his aura amp semblance that helps Neo free herself from the cat if he can help her aura override the cat's soul. She'll probably make her more of a anti-hero role after this if that does happen, more than a redeemed villain to hero role like Emerald or Ilya, but that would still work out the best for the kind of person she is that does prefer to work in the shades of moral darkness more than light. But that's for the future. Right now, I just want to praise this chapter for all its high qualities. That closing third was some of the most gripping, intense material in the series' lifetime, well above the equally strong dark highs of episodes with the Apathy, the Nuka-Lavi, and perhaps much of Beacon's Fall, thanks in large part to the fantastically animated and directed visuals that never try to mask the morose nature of what's going on. Through clever use of tilted camera angles, some of the stiffest combat in the show, and the previously discussed emphasis on keeping the dark visuals on screen rather than hidden away, we feel just as swamped by the encroaching heavy tone as RWBY is feeling, though major props as well to the audio work, with the strings during the onslaught on RWBY being the perfect nail-biting backing piece for such an overwhelmingly sinister and cruel set piece. The heavy beats as well when the cat takes over Neo really helps further escalate this new terror to a higher level of trouble, and the sound effects for every painful blow to RWBY just hurts in the best way possible, with equal praise as well rightfully given to the returning cast, who for the most of them that got to play a vastly different tone to their usual role, did so to perfection. Especially Taylor, who I really enjoyed hearing the small slip in subtle enough dark edges to the way she spoke in her lines that kept Penny being sounding sweet and heartbroken at the same time, but also making the barbs hurt all the more than if she just went full cruel. Though additional respect as well to Lindsay, who made my heart break hearing her desperately plea and struggle amidst all the attacks, as well as RWBY, who brought that true dark edge that I've loved in some of his past work to the cat twist that was able to help it land perfectly despite being an expected outcome. The creepiness in this whole Neo Mansion set piece also allowed for Neo and Roman to be animated perfectly as the commanding duo fully in their element, largely with the various instances of either them slipping into the shot out of nowhere and popping up around the other, almost like they're connected at the hip. It's so stylish, and yet it also helps add to how locked into the memory of Roman and his loss Neo is, that she only learns is being a hindrance, just as she and Roman aren't on the same wavelength for what she wanted once she finally got the victory over the Little Red. The danger now of having to deal with a corrupted Neo is also a good way to keep the living heroes in focus with a trial that they must overcome, whilst RWBY has to deal with what she needs to recover with herself in the afterlife. And again, while it was a bit jarring at points hearing the two voices clash in succession with each other, I deeply enjoyed how both Billy and Chris added such finesse and showman-like charm to Torchwick's masterful manipulating, so bowler hats off all around. It's surprising how dense this episode felt despite its short runtime, but damn if the crew didn't make the most of every minute to create one heck of an atmospheric thrill ride. Though again, maybe with added time, we could have gotten more from Leo and Clover at the mansion, and hearing more of the heroes' feelings on Ruby's outburst before they came into the scene, to get the really full potential of exploring these themes, but for what we got, it is still absolutely fantastic. Now it's time for the little details, and boy isn't that depressing to say now. But yes, there are some small highlights worth mentioning, like the perfect synergy in the party guests, right down to how they are matching some of the expressions on Roman and Neo's faces. The guests also shifting from individuals like Clover to Crow and Pyrrha to Jean upon seeing Oscar's body was a clever way to tie these outside faces to the scene despite not being as required for the abuse as the first batch. And finally, while scary in the moment, I like that both Jean and Blake tried to shield Weiss and Yang, two people that they obviously hold a lot dear to them, from Curious's hyper beam. And now the episode awards, which has been some of the hardest trio to decide this volume. I could just say the whole scene of the episode is the entirety of the mansion stuff, but that is more of a set piece of the episode, so let's narrow it down to just the reveal of Curious's true intentions, for the killer visuals, shocking outcome for Neo, and RWBY going full sketchier catchy in the most delightful of twisted ways. Character of the episode? I mean, RWBY, Curious, and Neo could all take it, but it does need to be Roman, who after so long away from the main show, came back to only steal it, with Roman as well being the cunning criminal to also steal away the voice acting gold star. And I'm actually going to give it to Billy Kemmons, as not only is this going to be a bit of a tribute to the guy as well, but it's so many of the cast were on top form, Billy just stands out above them all with instrumental parts to play and enrapturing me to Roman's devious delivery of Neo's scheme, with the textbook high charisma that Billy made his trademark. And if this is to be his only time under the bowler hat, what a way to shine so bright. So yeah, one of RWBY's darkest episodes is also one of this volume's strongest, and while largely helmed by just that one core scene, it did take the reins and lead the way so strong that it has to be well praised, with a vicious roasting of a hero that many shows wish they could pull off this effectively. And it's still wild to think that it's only going to help set up both a gripping final conflict and the hopeful dawn of RWBY's much needed return to who she's best as. And I get the sense the next episode could be something very special, so we duly true have to thank this chapter for the setup provided to it, even if it did leave many scars on our hearts, as it did smiles on our faces. But what do you guys think about this episode? It is time for you to let me know. Was it all too much to bear? Did you enjoy seeing many fan faves return this way? Did you see the curious twist coming? Do you want or hope Neo to survive and perhaps become a new ally? And what do you think will be the key that helps save RWBY's heart? Let me know in the comments down below, and while you're at it, hit the subscribe and bell buttons and tick the notification box to make sure you get every new video from me as they drop. And follow me on all my social medias at ThatKaitoDan for more on anything to do with RWBY, updates on the channel,